There we go. Hello, world. We are live. Welcome to the October 2024 Laravel Worldwide Meetup. I'm Dan Sapelsa, a developer at Vehicle, one of your co-hosts, and along with Margaret Tavares. We're thrilled to once again bring you some great insights from the PHP community and offer you this Laravel Meetup in the cloud. Speaking of my co-host, Margaret, how you doing today?
Doing pretty great, Dan. How are you doing?
Not too bad. It's the weather. Look up my window here in Canada. We're heading into fall, and unfortunately, this right now it's a little bit of a dreary day, but that's all right. We've got a great talk lined up, and there's lots of stuff going on in the Laravel community to be excited about. So who cares about the weather, right? All right. And with that, before we get to today's talk, we've got an awesome talk lined up, and I think a lot of people are excited to hear JMac talk today. But we've got some community stuff going on. So with that, I'll hand things over to you, Margaret. What do we got happening here?
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. And yeah, welcome to everyone that's new to the meetup. And thanks for anybody who's coming back and watching our meetups today. So let's run through some great resources for the Laravel community. So if you haven't heard about Laravel News, they have, it's ran by the awesome Eric Barnes. And they also have a weekly email newsletter. So if you want to sign up, you can go to laravelnews.com. You can also check out their YouTube channel where they interview people in the Laravel community. And they also have a podcast with Jake Bennett and Michael Drinda where they discuss all the latest Laravel releases, tutorials, and happenings in the Laravel community. Up next, we have the Laravel podcast. You can check them out at laravelpodcast.com. Here, for this season, Matt Stauffer is going to be hosting with Taylor Otwell for all of season 6. And so their latest episode covers updates in the Laravel ecosystem, the beta release of Inertia.js v2 and Laravel Cloud, and lots more. So be sure to check them out on laravelpodcast.com. We have Laravel Jobs. So Lara Jobs, if you haven't heard about this platform, it's a great place to find Laravel developers. If you're looking to hire, if you're looking to post a job, and for all your Laravel job needs, you can check them out. And we also have Laracasts. This is a great learning platform where it's ran by Jeffrey Way. So thank you, Jeffrey, for running this awesome platform. So everyone who wants to build their Laravel skills and have a platform to do that with others in the community, you can go to laracast.com. Some events that are coming up is Laravel Day, so November 7th. That's very soon. So to all my Italian Laravel friends, you could check it out online and in person, and the tickets are still available, and you can check them out at laravelday.it. We also have Laracon AU that's coming up, same time, 17 speakers from across Australia and around the world, and there's only a few tickets left, so please check them out at laracon.au. And we also have Laracon EU, which is going to be happening in February. So this is going to be happening in Amsterdam, Netherlands, just announced. Tickets are on sale now, and you can check them out at laracon.eu. And of course, big thank you to our host, their host sponsor, Vehicle. They're a great dev shop full of wonderful Laravel developers. And what they want to do is help you out with any Laravel code or any Laravel problems that you have. So you can check them out at vehicle.com. And of course, we have our JetBrains Giveaway. So we do this every meetup where all you got to do is scan that QR code and be entered into our draw. If you go to the next slide, here's some information. Oh, never mind. What we're going to be doing is at the end of this meetup, there'll be more information about when we're doing that draw. And so you can look out for an email from our community manager, Lee, who will be contacting you if you have one. So if you'd like, you'll see this QR code again at the end of this meetup, and you could sign up there.
Yeah, I'll just leave it there for an extra second. But yeah, thank you, Margaret. We'll have the QR code up at the end as well. So fear not, you'll have a chance to jump in there. So with that, though, we're heading into our talk for this month, and like a number of speakers we've had on the Laravel Worldwide Meetup, they don't need much of an introduction to the Laravel community. JMac's been involved in the Laravel community for many years. He's creator of Laravel Shift, which if you're not familiar with the product and you work on a Laravel application and have to upgrade versions over time, which is basically everybody, Laravel Shift's an unbelievable tool for helping with that process. So check that out. Jason also, shares a lot of insights on testing and software development on his YouTube channel, often working on live streams on various features on Shift. Also a speaker at numerous conferences, including multiple Laracons. Also a couple products he's released. You might want to check out Confident Laravel and the Base Code Field Guide. A lot of great insights in testing and software development there as well. And I had the pleasure of seeing Jason speak at a Louisville Laracon a number of years ago, where he talked about the concept of Yagni. And I didn't have a chance to say this to Jason yet, but it's a talk I've thought about a lot. And I don't think a day, certainly not a week goes by, I don't think of Yagni and apply that concept to my daily workflow. So really excited to hear Jason speak today. He's coming in here. He's going to talk about Blueprint, which is a really cool tool he developed which allows you to rapidly prototype Laravel application and various features within it. So without further ado, we'll bring the man of the hour in. JMac, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Super, like I said, super stoked to have you here. Thanks for coming in and sharing some insights. So yeah, without further ado, unless you need anything from us, we'll want to go ahead and share your screen and we'll hand things off to you. And
let's do that. Share entire screen. All right, there we go. Let's look at a terminal here for a second. Everybody seeing that?
Terminal. Cool. All right, I think we're good to go. Are you good to go?
Good to go. Do we have picture in picture? Are you seeing me too?
I see you. Yeah, we'll see you on the side there and your picture as well. So Margaret and I are just going to step backstage. If you need anything, just let us know. But take it away, and we'll talk to you in a little bit.
Good luck.
Okay.
All right. See you in a bit.
Cool. All right. So yeah, as they said, I am Jason McCreary. You probably know me in the Laravel community as JMac, the creator of Shift. What you might not know is I'm actually I'm a sucker for efficiency and automation. And these, of course, both go hand in hand. If you can automate something, then, of course, you're going to be more efficient. And again, they play to each other. And, again, if you look at those two kind of core things that I really like, it's not a stretch to see that I built something like Shift, right? Something that automates kind of the tedious work when you have to upgrade between major Laravel versions. And that's great, right, when you need to upgrade, but that's only happening once a year. What about automation kind of more on a daily basis? What about automation for like code generation, right? Shift can work on existing code, but what about when we're creating code, right? And Laravel actually gives you some tools to create code. The most notable here is PHP Artisan Make, of course. And the most absolute code generation possible that you're going to get from Artisan Make is if you do make model -a, and then in fact you can throw on --test. And then, of course, let's just do something simple like a post model again, just to demo it here. Now, when we run this, again, this is the most automation, most code generation you're going to get from Laravel's Artisan Make tool out of the box. And this is pretty good, right? It looks pretty impressive on the surface here. We get a test, we get the post model, we get a factory, the migration, a seeder. We get form requests for a resourceful controller. The controller test is generated. Even a policy is thrown in there for good measure, if you might want to use that. So again, all of this code or is generated for you. And I stutter there because this is a bit of a facade, actually. Again, on the surface, it looks like it's doing a lot, and it's definitely a helpful command. We'll come back to that, but really, again, pun intended, it's a bit of a facade. So let's go take a look at some of this code that it generated. This post code, as we see here, it gave us the file and it gave us kind of this class skeleton, but it didn't really generate any code per se, not application code anyway, right? It generated files and the skeleton and so forth, but this resourceful controller is really, again, the most code generation that's happening. And again, these are just stubs for the 7 resourceful methods in a controller. If we go look at something like the migration, again, it gives us kind of the shell for this, some code in here, but it's not actually giving us the application code that we might use. It's really just stubbing out, skeletoning out these particular components within your application. And that's good. That's efficient, right? We just typed a few very small things here, make model -a, maybe a dozen characters there, and we got all of these files. So from an efficiency perspective, this is pretty awesome, right? This is good. But from an automation perspective, there's more that we can do here. So let's kind of go down like this evolutionary path that I went down a couple years ago to ultimately land on a tool that does both, right? Both efficient and automation. So as the creator of Shift, something else I get to see is I kind of have a pulse on the Laravel community. I get to see kind of the features that are used and how people can structure their apps and all of these kind of high level data points that Shift has to be aware of to, again, effectively upgrade all of these tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of applications that it does. And I talked about this in a previous LaRCon talk, Laravel by the numbers. You can find it out on YouTube if you're interested in all those data points and kind of how they get used. But one of the data points is the packages that are available in Laravel, or the packages that are most commonly used. And one of them I came across years ago was this Laravel 5 generators, this Laracast generators. And despite its name and even the README, it is actually compatible with Laravel 10, and I believe it's compatible with Laravel 11 still as well. I'm not necessarily going to install this, but I want to give it kind of an honorable mention because this takes us a little bit farther down that automation path than Artisan Make does on its own. And we'll just kind of look at this little animated GIF here to kind of get an idea of what's happening. But it adds an additional make command. And what it does is you're able to pass it kind of this comma separated bits of data, right? You can say a schema. So you can say name string, you can say description as text, age as integer, all these things that are properties on your model or columns in your database, as well as their data type. And so you got to pass all that on the command line in this artisan command, and you hit enter, and it's going to generate a really rich artisan, a Laravel migration for you, right? Now, this is nice. This is better. It's doing more automation, so it gives us kind of heavier on the automation side. It's actually taking application data, application-specific data, and generating code with that. But it's not very efficient. Typing all that out on the command line, as you know, is not only a bit cumbersome, but if you make a mistake, like you really have to arrow back this comma-separated schema thing inside of quotes. It's very dense, right? It's not necessarily reusable. Again, it's not easy to kind of type all that out. So from an efficiency perspective, I wouldn't necessarily consider this efficient to use. And I also don't feel like it's efficient in the data that it's given. So for example, this is only giving us a migration, but we gave it a lot of data here. We told it data types, like what about filling in aspects of the model? What about automatically inferring relationships? There's so much more once you start to give it even just a little bit of data that you could do with it. So I don't think it's very efficient in using the data that it's given. So again, both of these great tools, obviously Artisan Make comes out of the box. This tool is available as well if you just want simple migration generation for kind of just some limited command line typing. Again, that's nice. But all of this ultimately led me to Blueprint. Blueprint is a code generation tool for Laravel, and it's meant to be, again, efficient and heavily automated. And it's heavily automated by the fact that it leverages Laravel conventions. So we're going to see all of this as we start to learn more about Blueprint. Now, if you've used Blueprint before, don't shy away. I'm going to get to some kind of creator tips on how you can use it efficiently here in a little bit, but let's give it a fair demo as we have the rest of these projects. So this project that we're using here already, this LWWM, Laravel Worldwide Meetup project, is a Laravel 11 project. So we can say Laravel Artisan version. And all I've really done is run Laravel new, and then I installed Blueprint just to save us the composer bit. All those commands are readily available right here. You can just copy in this requirement. And then if you plan to use the assertions, you can copy this in as well. But again, let's give this a fair demo as we have with the other ones. I'm just going to copy in what Blueprint calls this draft file. I'll go over all this in a second, but let's just go ahead and demo it. So I'm on a Mac. I'm going to do pb paste, and I'm going to dump this into a draft YAML file. Now this is kind of the structure of the application. This is what's going to generate code, much like the stuff we passed on the command line to the other commands we were looking at before. And then the next thing I'll do is Artisan Blueprint build. I'm going to actually build the stuff that's in that draft. I'm going to bring it to life. So when we run this, we get a similar output as Artisan Make, and it generates a lot of files for us. But we'll notice a couple things right away before we actually go look at the files. It didn't just create things, it actually updated existing code as well. In this case, it updated the routes web file. So let's go take a look underneath at what's being generated here that's different from some of the other things we've looked at already. So if I jump back into the post migration here, oh, I didn't nah that stuff away. You know what? Let's give this, again, a fair shake. Let's make sure to nah everything away so we don't get confused. My draft file. Come back, draft file. There you are. I nahed too much. Let's clear this out and let's PB paste that back. I don't want to confuse us with what was generated by Artisan a minute ago. So let's just make sure we regenerate everything from Blueprint only so we don't have any artifacts from that previous make model command we ran. So if we go in and look at the post migration right away, we can see that the migration already has more code in it. It already has application-specific code. So it's the same shell that we got from Artisan Make, but notice now that it actually has column definitions using the appropriate data types and attributes for these columns. And then taking that, we can actually go and look at the post model. It takes those columns and infers, again, from Laravel conventions, what should be fillable. The data types are put into a cast. It even can figure out the relationships based, again, on those data types. So from giving a very simple definition, much like we did with that layer cache generators package, we're now generating more and more code. Let's go into like something like the post controller. We see here in the post controller, again, it's a resourceful controller, but now we actually have code within the methods. Index, for example, very basic cruddy code here, but it just displays all of the posts, right? Common code that you would expect within a resourceful controller for the post resource, right? Store creates something based on a form request. Now we actually have super custom code inside here beyond just CRUD that's listed inside of the store methods. So we can get very, very specific. It can generate basic CRUD, but it can also generate very specific common actions like sending an email, dispatching a job, firing events. It's going to do all of that, or allow you to write all that out and generate that code as well. But wait, there's more. As mentioned, I love testing. When you run Blueprint, it'll actually generate tests for all the code that it wrote for you as well. Fully functional tests. Now, these aren't just stubs either. We notice here that we have 5 different tests, but also 15 assertions within them. So let's just go take a look at the post controller tests. So not only is it generating the code for your application, it's generating tested code, fully tested code. So we see here index displays view. It's actually using the factories it created. It creates 3 of them, hits the route, make sure the response is okay, make sure the view is what's expected, make sure it has your posts. It makes sure that store uses that form request for validation. It actually creates faker data. It fakes all of the appropriate facades for the mail, the job, the events that we were dispatching and sending. It makes sure that things got put into the database. Again, all of those facades had the appropriate action. They were passed in the post, the author email, all of that stuff. Fully tested code. Now, of course, you're welcome to come in here and just like your application code, make this all a bit more, tighten it up, make it a bit more strong so we can run this again. We see here all the tests still pass. We now have 19 assertions because we tightened this view has up just a little bit by saying not only does it have the variable post, but it matches the 3 posts that came from our fake or our testing database. So fully tested code, fully generated code. How did we get all this, right? Okay, well, let's go back to that draft YAML file. All right, nobody necessarily likes YAML, but it is a human readable domain language, if you will, and it allows you to create a language, in this case, this kind of blueprint syntax or grammar that's used, again, in a readable way. Some people might think like, okay, well, let's use JavaScript, or sorry, JSON. But, you know, JSON has a lot of extra syntax. So like if I started to represent this the same way, I now have to say, you know, models, and I have post, and then inside of post, like this has to be an object, and that's an object. When it's already so cumbersome to write all this out as JavaScript, or sorry, JSON, because of all the additional syntax around the JSON object notation. So like, using YAML, while you might not like it, is human readable. It's nice, it's clean, it's here, and it gives us this very simple kind of key value syntax. So let's take a look at the syntax itself. So we have this models section. And within models, we can define all of the different models of our application. So in our demo case, we defined a post model, and we gave it just the fields that were specific kind of, again, to our application. Notice that we didn't necessarily have to specify ID or timestamps. Again, Blueprint is about efficiency and automation. I want to give you the most for typing the least, right? We know in Laravel that traditionally, conventionally, models have IDs, models have timestamps. You don't need to type that out. We can see how we can override that here in a second if we need to, but you don't have to by default. You just need to specify the fields that are on that model, and you can specify their different data types. Now, these data types, you might be thinking, okay, well, do I have to go learn all these different data types? Well, no, they're actually the same ones that Laravel uses in its column types. So if we jump into the docs and we scroll down to available column types, all of these match Laravel. So if it's in Laravel, char, binary, string, all of these things, timestamp, float, double, enum, all of them are in here. These are the same ones you would type in a migration if you were typing PHP code within your Laravel migration. All of the attributes are the same as well, the nullable. The only difference in the syntax is really if you want to pass or set any kind of additional parameters. So in this case, the string length is 400. You would just say colon 400. So all of your column types are available in Laravel. There's not too much to learn as far as the models go in setting their data types. Now, this one's a little bit different, this author ID. This is an example of where Blueprint figured out for you that relationship, that belongs to relationship that we saw in our model. Let's just go back and take a look. We see here that we have author belongs to user. Now, this is actually a bit unconventional, which is why it's in the README example, is to demonstrate that you can do things unconventional. It might be common to, name this author a little more human, a little more domain specific than calling it user. But underneath, it's still a user model. So if you want to do it that way, you can say something like author ID here. You would say ID to reference that foreign ID. And then you could say, again, like an attribute, colon user to reference the model that it does. Now, if this all just would have been user ID, then Laravel would have Blueprint would have just figured out that relationship for you. You don't have any of that kind of custom naming that we saw in the README example. All right, moving down to controllers. Same concept. We have this top section. We have post controller. Again, to not have you type everything out, conventionally controllers have a controller suffix. So you can say post controller here if you want, but you don't have to. And using that post, it knows now that you are a resourceful controller for that specific model because Blueprint sees that a post model exists in your application. Now, each section underneath of this are the controller actions. So in this case, index and store. And within there are what's called controller statements. So these are the things that we saw that got generated in code. So let's just bring these up kind of side by side so we can see these in action. Oh, my side-by-side's not working. Split and move right. There we go. So if we bring index up into the fold here, we see query all results into pulling all posts, this eloquent query, and then we render post index with post. We can see here that renders a view post index with the post variable with whatever variables that you have in there. Store similarly, we have validation that happens. This command not only triggers it to call validated, but actually is what sets up that underlying form request. So we can see here that title, content, author ID are all figured out based on the information that came from the model. And then finally, kind of finishing that up, let's bring up the draft YAML file. Finishing that up, we see all these other statements that are available. So kind of jumping out to Blueprint docs. Oops, let's go to the actual docs. Where are the docs? Definition of components. There we go. Yeah. So if we go into statements, you can see here that we have all sorts of different statements. I think there's about 15 in total. And again, while these are specific to Blueprint, you'll find that they feel very much like Laravel. Dispatch, respond, render, validate, redirect, query. These things, they're not far-fetched. You'll get used to them very, very quick. They might even, in some cases, like dispatch and so forth, be the exact command, again, that you would type if you were writing this code out. But here, the real point is that in 21 lines of YAML, we've generated a very significant portion of the application. Again, we generated all of these files, the jobs, the mail, the mailables, the migration. We even generated the blade templates. And again, all fully tested code out of the box. Any line of code that Blueprint generated is covered in a test. So that's pretty awesome for 21 lines, again, of pretty human readable YAML. So cool, that was the demo, right? So we get all that code, we see that. Let's actually like use Blueprint just a little bit for like a very quick example. So I'm going to NAD this all out again. Let's make another draft.yaml file. And let's NAD this. There actually is a command. We can say blueprint artisan blueprint init. And it'll create an example draft YAML file, and it runs trace. We're going to come back to trace here in a second, but there is a command to go ahead and generate this for you. Now, I'm just going to focus on models for right now, and let's kind of build one from scratch so we get a feel. It was a little dense to kind of hear me work through the README example. So let's just start at the top here. So let's say that we have a conference. I think that's kind of a domain object everybody might be familiar with. And a conference, what does a conference have? A conference probably has a name. That's great, going to be a string. It probably has like a starts at maybe. And again, that's a date time. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. So it's a date time, but of course we could use any of the other things in there. Maybe it's an all-day event, so we just use date. Maybe we use timestamp, right? You can use any of those things that are available as data types, column types in Laravel. It's all just the same name. And then let's talk a little bit about relationships, right? You can build as many columns as you want. Again, that all kind of matches. I think relationships is where Blueprint, some of its automation, some of its efficiency, some of its syntax may differ. So let's talk a bit about those. There's two ways to define relationships. The easiest way is a belongs to. Easiest and most common is belongs to. So if we had something like a conference is probably at a venue, so we could say like venue, and then we would say ID. Now, Blueprint's automatically going to figure out that since this is an ID, that it's a foreign key to the venue model. And it's going to do that just as the same conventions Laravel uses by taking the prefix of whatever that column name is. Now, the other way to define relationships is you actually say relationships, and underneath kind of this sub option within your model, you would define belongs to here. And you would say more at a high level, it belongs to venue. And then this is where you would just name the additional models. And maybe this is a venue. Maybe it also belongs to like a region. So if we think of like Laracon, they're regional. There's US, there's EU, there's AU, there's India. So maybe they belong to a region. We can go deeper with the relationships beyond just the belongs to. We can start to go into any of the relationships. So it has many talk, right? It has many attendee. So all of these things to build out kind of this conference model, right? So this is a good example of kind of building a domain thing from scratch. In just 8 lines here, we have kind of a basic conference model. Again, we could add as many or as little of these columns as we want. All of that's going to match. Again, we can make things like that nullable. I'm going to get rid of venue here just to demonstrate both paths. So we have belongs to and this path. Let's go ahead and generate this. So let's go back, PHP artisan blueprint build. So if we run this, we'll see that it makes the conference factory, it makes the conference migration. Now, we're not getting all that other code, again, because we only defined our models section. But if we go take a look at something like our conference model, again, we're getting a lot from those 8 lines. It's putting in the fillable, it's taking care of the cast, it's setting up that regions belongs to, that venue belongs to. It's also setting up the relationships for those has many. All those relationships, whether we define them in line as a column on the database, or we define them underneath that relationships property, they all got generated for us. If we go take a look at the conferences table, I don't think it shows those up in the generation, but it will generate your has many tables as well. That's a configuration option if you want. So those bits where it says has many, it'll generate the pivot table as well from the conventions of Laravel using talk ID and conference ID within the specific pivot tables. So we can configure those as well. I'm going to talk about the configuration here in just a bit. But we get all of that from the conference, from these 8 lines directly. So let's move on to controllers. Controllers has, again, its own kind of statements and syntax. But if we go here with conference, we can talk again about what I call in Blueprint shorthands. So when we want to define conference, the conference controller, if we just want a simple cruddy controller or a resourceful controller, we can simply say resource. Now, technically, this isn't valid YAML. What Blueprint will do with its shorthands is if you type something like this, it's going to pre-expand that before it parses the YAML and turn that into what the representation of a resourceful controller is, meaning it's going to predefine, all of the 7 resourceful actions: index, create, store, show, edit, update, delete. It's going to put all those out for you. So this is what's called a shorthand. So let me demonstrate the power of these shorthands. Again, typing less to give you more. Just 3 lines, PHP artisan blueprint build. And again, now we get all of this from those 3 lines. We get the conference controller itself. We get the test that we talked about. We get those form requests for common cruddy actions. We get the 4 templates, blade templates put out for us. And it even updates our routes web file to register. We didn't look at this earlier, but to register that resourceful controller right there. So if we go take a look at the resourceful controller, again, we didn't type any of these Blueprint statements inside of our YAML. It's going to give us what common behavior, what common cruddy actions are for those resourceful bits. So in this case, index, again, it's going to put all of them out. Create's just going to demonstrate or display the view. Store is going to use that form request to create a conference with the validated data. It's going to flash the conference ID to the session, and it's going to redirect you back to index, right? So this basically just built you a very simple admin system, if you will, in just 3 lines of code. So now what this resource actually expands out to be valid YAML is web. It expands even beyond that. But I'm bringing this up because the default is a web resource. But if you're generating APIs, for example, you can actually change this to API. Let me go ahead and NA this out. Oh, NA kills my draft file too. I needed a special command when I do this. Okay, let's touch draft.yaml again, and let's just retype those draft bits. So controllers, conference, resource, API. Fortunately, again, not much to type, just 3 lines. So let's do blueprint build again, just to demonstrate the difference between, we lost our conference model. PHP artisan, so much nang. I shouldn't have done it. Not dash A. Let's do model conference. Boop. There we go. Let's see if that helps. Nope. It's not going to like us without the conference model. Underneath the covers, PHP artisan, hold on, let's see if I can get around this. Blueprint, I'll explain this here in a second, but Blueprint traces models, and if it can't find them, it explodes. Okay, cool. We're going to come back to the trace command here in just a second. Let's go back to our conference controller that we just generated. So underneath here now, we see that we only get 5 of the resourceful actions because we generated an API bit. And notice that the responses now are not blade. That's why we didn't see, it's kind of buggy here with all the code, but we see here that it didn't create the blade resources and all kind of those other things, form requests and so forth. It's actually creating resource collections and everything else, and updated our routes API. So it's doing a little bit of different behavior, and on the surface doesn't appear to be generating as much code, because it's actually generating things that are, again, more specific to APIs. In this case, returning eloquent resources or resource collections of that specific data. So if you're working with APIs, again, out of the box, just 3 lines of code, we've optimized for that as well. And of course, going back to the demo, you're able to type whatever you want here. You can actually augment these two together. So let's say you wanted most of the CRUD actions, but maybe your index does something custom. Maybe it sends some mail or whatever. You can override them. You can get the best of both worlds. So again, it's all about efficiency. It's all about giving you more, typing less, figuring out, using Laravel conventions, using the models that exist to wire everything up as efficiently and as automated as possible. So that's a good example of kind of controllers as well. Again, you can use the documentation. You can reference the README to kind of see how other things are being used, see the different statements that are available. But let's jump to configuration now. I kind of alluded to this. Let me clear this out. Got a lot of noise there from our errors. So if we do PHP artisan vendor publish, publish. We get a nice little prompt here. We should be able to get the blueprint config. Cool. Okay, let's take a look at blueprints config, because I live in the real world, and while I want to give you the most, I want to leverage conventions. I believe in following Laravel's conventions as much as you can, as much as possible. Kind of sticking with the defaults. I know that, there's reasons to have customizations, common customizations out there. Again, as the creator of Shift, I kind of see areas that are commonly customized. And all of those are configurable within Blueprint. So much like any configuration file within Laravel, you got these nice comment headers for what these options are. They're also defined in the documentation as well, but you can just publish this config file. If you want to change things like your namespace, if you want to change the location of your models, or where policies or controllers or any of these things that Blueprint generates, you can start to customize those things as well. Maybe you're generating code underneath source, or you follow some kind of modular design and you need to generate it in a different place. Do you want to generate PHP docs for like your model properties and all of the methods and stuff like that? Again, the default's false, but maybe you enjoy those. Do not disturb. Let's make sure my wife doesn't text me here while I'm midstream, so we'll add another hour there. Foreign key constraints, again, we weren't doing this out of the box, but you're able to tack those on if you want to have those locked down at the database, and then change kind of the actions that happen on delete or on update, whether or not to fake nullables. You can find all of these things in here, one of which is that option to generate pivot tables. The one I want to focus on real quick, because as PEST gains more popularity, and we talked about how Blueprint will generate tests for you, the default is still PHP unit to test, but as you can see here commented out, we can simply swap these generators to instead use the PEST test generator. So now the test that is generated will be a PEST test instead of the PHP unit test. So it'll generate that code for you as well. And to the point, while we're here, generators are what Blueprint uses to kind of pass that syntax down to generate all the different components within Laravel. So we can see from this list, the generator for controllers, factories, seeders, the tests themselves, as we just swapped to PEST. And what that means, what this is all kind of getting to, is that Blueprint is extendable. You could have this generate, for example, anything else within your application. You could generate Livewire components. You can generate maybe things within Filament. I know there's a lot of third-party tools, Nova, Filament, these things, that do have third-party plugins, third-party generators that you can add on to Blueprint. So if you want to generate even more code, some of that stuff's out there and available in the community. The documentation talks about how you can extend it, but also, again, the ones that are available to you. There's also some resources out there like Drawl SQL, I think, allows you to export what you drew as a draft YAML file. So more and more things are actually, catching on to the power and the use of Blueprint that are going to allow you to do kind of even more with it. And I'm always adding a bit to it as well. For example, I'm trying to make Laravel component generation first party. So that's something I hope to have out in the coming weeks. The final thing I want to mention before I take some questions on Blueprint is understand that Blueprint, just for kind of how it gets used, you might be thinking, okay, well, this is only for new code generation or brand new applications. And that's not actually true. I've tried to intentionally demonstrate kind of using this draft file in different capacities. I'm not generating all of my models and all of my controllers all at once. I'm kind of jumping in here, again, very intentionally, just generating a model, just generating the controller maybe for that model, doing things of that nature kind of back and forth. So you can very much use this in existing applications, and you should very much use this in kind of a throwaway scratch pad brainstorming type capacity, just like I've demoed it here with the NA and all that stuff. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't feel like you have to put everything in that draft YAML file right away. And the final thing I want to mention kind of to that point, and I've alluded to it a few times here, is when you run PHP Artisan, Blueprint, and init, not only do you get the draft file, but you'll notice that it says traced one model. And we can actually run that command ourselves explicitly. So we can say Blueprint trace. And what this is going to do is trace one model. Now, I NAD everything away, meaning I got rid of all of the stuff that we've generated. But our application does, out of the box, contain one model. That's the user model. What trace does is it's actually going in and looking at your current application, and it's figuring out which models and so forth that you have. It's kind of tracing the current blueprint of your application. And what that means is it allows you, again, to jump even in an existing application immediately into this draft file. And I can now say something like generate a resourceful user controller. So if I run PHP Artisan Blueprint build, we should now get everything for that user controller. So Laravel gives you a user out of the box with certain data fields, right? I just traced all those and generated a cruddy controller based on that. So if we go look at user controller, we can see now that it's actually going to, if we go look at something like user store, it's going to do its best to go figure out what's available on that user model. We didn't define any of this. So again, an existing application, I could just generate from tracing those models, and I have direct access to use and reference those models and be aware of its properties. So Blueprint very much is for existing applications as well as new applications to generate code. So it's kind of a common misconception when you jump in. You might not think or feel like it's for existing apps, but you can very much generate any code, whether it be a brand new application or an existing application. So keep that in the back of your mind. And with that, I am going to get a drink of water and take some questions. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Awesome. I'll let you grab a drink of water there, JMac. Thank you so much.
Cool. Let's see if we can fix the focus on that. That's weird.
It's pretty good. There was a couple people in the chat mentioned something about their 1080p resolution being a little off, but other people said it was just fine. So hopefully it's good for everyone. But no, I don't think that's anything you did. But yeah, thank you so much, Jason. I mean, there's a ton there. It's always cool to see someone work with the tool they've created. They know inside and out, and they're really efficient using. Yeah. So, and actually my first question was, you kind of answered it right at the end there. And that was a thought I had coming into this talk that, of like being like, my mind goes to, this is a new application, greenfield kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's the case at all, right? Cause you can just use it for subsets of your application, for, components within it. And I think that idea of being able to even quicker than the do so in a fashion that's even faster than the tools that Laravel gives us out of the box. So yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. Artisan's awesome. The Artisan make commands are great. Like if you're just kind of generating, again, a very simple file. But if you want to go beyond that, I think Blueprint, I tend to use even in existing applications.
Yeah.
For small models, it's just going to give me so much. It's going to fill in those blanks. Like I kind of don't use it for controllers a whole lot, to be honest, but I definitely like it for models because there's a lot, especially if you're testing, there's a lot with a model, right? You really want that data information. You need the migration. It's got to have the columns in it. Then you want to map those to fake data in your factory if you're testing. So there's a lot you have to write for a model in a modern application. So I think the models are where the Blueprint power really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually kind of one of my questions, which I guessed already. Like you've probably had, with all your work on Laravel Shift and otherwise, you probably had a pretty good chance to kind of dog food this package a little bit and kind of use it for your own purposes and then work out some of the kinks and pain points. Is that fair to say? Have you used it like with Laravel Shift at all and then creating some features within Laravel Shift?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. I've been working on more side projects. I mean, the beauty and the curse of Shift is that it's kind of my only Laravel project, just because it's just me and I'm working on it, all the time. And the underlying engine of Shift is not Laravel. It's some PHP, but it's not Laravel. Like the website and the kind of checkout experience is Laravel, of course. But there's not a lot of new development on it, so I unfortunately actually don't get to use Blueprint a whole lot day to day. But some of the new side projects I kicked up, I absolutely just because as developers, we already have kind of the architecture of a new project in our head. We've already thought it out. We've already thought out some of the basic models. So something like Blueprint's beautiful in the beginning. It's not just limited to the beginning, but it's very beautiful for the beginning because we already kind of pre-architected that data in our head. We know we're going to have, the user, the talk, the attendee, the conference. Like if we're building a little meetup.com, like, the basic 5 or 6 models and the fields for the MVP that are there. And so to just generate those in 20 lines of YAML and have all that code get kicked out is awesome.
Yeah, that's super powerful. Yeah.
So sorry, just one thing before I drop there, my bad. Just seeing how you created like a whole admin system in 3 lines of code. I thought that was so wild. Just being able to do that right out of the box is magic.
Yeah, it'd be really cool and I think, again, some of these extensions do that, but I think there's a huge opportunity, and Filament might be looking into this with some of their own generation. I've seen some tweets, but like if you paired the view template's really the next step. So like if you paired that, knowing like it was a resourceful action, if you paired that with like Tailwind UI, or you paired it with like Filament or Nova, you could generate a lot of an application, again, in just the same amount of lines of YAML. So like, I'd love to see someone really get opinionated about the view part of it and say, okay, well, this just generated this front end based on this YAML as well. Because you absolutely could. You have what you need to do like tabular stuff. It's just a lot of front end code, right?
Absolutely. We have there's some questions in the chat from the community here, so we want to pull those in. I think maybe a couple of them have been answered, or answered in part at least, but let's go through them here. So the first one here from Javier is there a way to generate the JSON for the basically the JSON resource for the response? And I think you did kind of touch on that. You talked about sort of the modified YAML syntax there, where you can add that resource keyword. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the controller statements is resource. And so you're able to, that much like when you say dispatch or send a mail or whatever, it Blueprint knows based on that controller statement what class it needs to generate. So if you say resource and then here's the name of that resource, it'll stub out that file just as if you made like artisan make resource. And then of course it's going to fill it in with the model you told it that the resource is part of. So resource is one of the controller statements, and then it automatically knows what to do to make that resource.
Awesome. Next question is, are there any solutions for views, admin panel, etc.? I think you were kind of just touching on some of this. Yeah,
that's probably the area where Blueprint is lacking. And again, the front end's so opinionated. Like, do we use raw blade? Do we use Livewire? Is it inertia? Is it Vue? Is it React? Is it, there's just so many options that it's not an area I'm probably going to touch. Blueprint will generate the blade templates, but much like the artisan commands or even the Livewire commands for that matter, it's just a stub still. I would love to see an extension though, if you're opinionated about that.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my questions. And actually that kind of leads into, there's another question here. Let's pull this one up. what advice would you give to developers looking to contribute or build tools for the Laravel ecosystem? My question was more in part to some of the stuff you touched on specifically for Blueprint, right? In terms of like what add-ons have you maybe had the community asking a lot about, or what things would you like to maybe see in the core of Blueprint that people could help contribute?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking for contributions on Blueprint, just like any other open source project. You can jump into the issues, and some projects tag things in GitHub. It's called good first issue, and that's a good way to maybe something that the author might feel is lightweight enough for new developers to take on without having to kind of learn the whole code base. If you're talking a bit like building your own, that could be a whole talk. I would say, if you're interested in building something on your own, like just build something that you would use. It sounds simple, but like trying to build something for the masses is really, really hard to get right on a lot of different levels. I've found that most of my successful stuff, Shift included, are things that I initially used and wanted myself. Shift, I used to work at a web agency. I was contracted to upgrade a lot of Laravel sites, several, and I started writing scripts to do that. Of course, efficiency and automation. I started writing scripts to do that. I'm a lazy dev, right? Same with Blueprint. I was generating new code. I felt like Artisan Make could do more. I actually PR'd some stuff into the framework, and Taylor, it was kind of just beyond the scope to him. That's not really what the framework's about. I used to use Rails. Rails has a generate command that does more than Artisan does, arguably. So again, scratch your own itch is kind of the point. I think you'll find the most success there. If nothing else, you'll find the most fulfillment because you're building something you want yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I think at least there's one person that has that challenge that you're trying to deal with. And I think too, if it's a personal itch that you're scratching or something you're particularly interested in, it's a much greater likelihood that you're going to stick with that thing over the long term, right? As opposed to just trying to solve a problem that you're not really invested in yourself.
Yeah.
And I always love hearing the inception story about why things were created. It's always to, like you were saying, to scratch your own itch, or just you were lazy and so you wanted to make things a lot easier for you. And I always feel like that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. That speaks volumes there.
There's a lot of questions, a lot of engagement. So I'm gonna get to all of them. But here we have, does Blueprint have support or plans for supporting things like Open API?
Yeah, some people have asked this before. There's definitely some common formats out in the world that existed, again, right? Like this JSON that, I kind of mentioned, why YAML, why make your own. Kind of going back to the same answer. The reality is, while there are some out there, not everybody necessarily uses those. And so it's kind of like, how do you make that choice? I was comfortable writing a small kind of domain language in YAML. And while it's not one of the existing ones, I felt like that allowed me to at least align very closely to Laravel's own syntax. So it's not much to learn. So if you're using OpenAI, to your question, it's kind of like, well, why not just use OpenAI? But you have to remember, there are a lot of people that are not using OpenAI. I think, if again, there are a lot of things in the community. I can't keep up with all of them. Blueprint's gained more traction than I would have expected over the years. There might be something that's OpenAI to draft YAML, right? There might be some converter that does that. So while Blueprint probably won't support it itself, to answer your question, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of online scrubber or tool that was like, paste in your OpenAI, JSON definition and get Blueprint draft file, right?
So sorry, I think maybe when you're saying OpenAI, do you mean Open API?
Oh, sorry, Open API. Sorry.
I wasn't sure.
AI.
It's the big buzz, right?
Yeah, it's on. AI is so buzzed now. I was saying the wrong word. Sorry. Open API. Yes, I don't support the Open API JSON syntax directly, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of conversion tool. Maybe OpenAI can do that too. Hey, see.
There you go. Yeah, they could use that.
Put it in ChatGPT.
Bit of a lengthy question here, but I think really what it's asking about is stub files, and maybe there's a chance to look under the hood a bit. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Blueprint is already leveraging stub files under the hood, and is that correct?
Yeah, so Laravel, when you run artisan make, it has what's called stub files, and you can publish those and tweak those. So again, the skeleton files that you get from artisan maybe match your application a little bit better. Blueprint similarly has the same kind of stub files, which you can publish and customize as well. They just contain these little kind of blade syntax placeholders that get replaced by the system.
Oh.
Ideally, I would like to have those overlap so that if you did publish your Laravel stub files, that Blueprint would use those directly. There's an open issue for that within Blueprint and something I'd like to revisit down the road. But yes, stub files are basically the little text-based files that Blueprint and Laravel use to kind of generate the code that we're seeing. And if you crack them open, they just have these little kind of mail merge tags that are waiting, these little placeholder tags that are waiting to get code injected into them.
That makes sense. And I'd imagine if you were extending Blueprint and building your own thing that generates code for your use case, you'd probably be part of that story would be creating a stub file, right? For that piece of it.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to get deep into extending Blueprint, with maybe like some kind of Nova front end, they might have like a nova.stub file, or a nova resource.stub file. And, that generator kicks code out into that file.
That makes a lot of sense.
We got a few more questions
Yeah,
here.
sure.
We got this one from Jeff. Does Blade support? Does Blueprint support the monolith version with React, or does the output only support Blade?
Right now, it's only Blade. Again, there's a lot of opportunity in the front end to generate more code. So I think it'd be very easy to extend Blueprint and write your own React generator, and it might be aware, it's going to get past all of the data that all the other generators get past. It's going to get the controller information, the model information, and from that, maybe what to generate. So.
Okay, cool. And then another quick question here. Sorry, Dan. I don't think we said this yet, but from Anouk, if we update existing model fields, will a new migration be created?
That is an area, yeah. So while you can definitely use Blueprint for existing applications, it will not necessarily change existing code. Meaning, if you have a model, if you already have a user model in your application, and then you define a user model in your draft file and run Blueprint build, it's going to use the one you set in Blueprint build. It's not necessarily going to augment your existing model. So that is a bit of a boundary case. It doesn't update code. Technically speaking, it's what's called a passive code generator. So it's just kind of one-time run, and it gives you that code. It's not an active one that is all-knowing of your whole code base at all times, even with that trace command. So yeah, that is a boundary, a limitation, I guess you could say, but it's kind of by design. It's assuming that you're generating components, whether for an existing application or a new application. It's assuming that you're generating new code.
Any advice there, maybe, because that ran through my mind, Jason, was like, if I install a new Laravel app and I get like that user model out of the box, if you were in that situation, you wanted to use Blueprint to augment your user model a bit, would you then just kind of recreate that in your draft and then go from there and add more fields? Would you blow away what Laravel gives you out of the box, or do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably just blow away what Laravel gave me. I mean, if you're augmenting it enough,
yeah,
like,
depends on the application, I'm sure.
I mean, I could share a screen and show you a hacky thing again if you really want, but like, if you had an existing model and it was a big model and you wanted all of its properties, right? Like it's beyond just 2 or 3 columns. Like maybe it's a 10-column model. When you trace a model, that there is a .blueprint file that's created in your project. Inside of that .blueprint file is YAML. So what I would do in your scenario is I would trace the existing model. I would get into that .blueprint file, copy its YAML, put it into a new draft file, and then forcibly overwrite the existing code. That would give me kind of a handmade augmented model, if that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. So that actually answers another question I had in the back of my mind, was like, what potential exists currently or in the future for, I could see this being useful if I'm going to create a new application and I know there's another application where there's a whole bunch of things I kind of want.
Yeah.
what could I do to like export a draft YAML and just drop it in my new app?
Same thing. You could go to your other you could go to your other thing, install Blueprint, just run trace. Take what you want out of the .blueprint file.
That's cool. That's
and
awesome.
Put it into your draft file in your new project. And now you would have models that matched the same thing. But again, the nice thing is you're not just copying one model file at a time. You're getting all of the resources.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm looking at that myself.
There's other fun use cases. Like some people really like to like with the dynamicy of Laravel and models specifically, some people like to document properties, like at property in the PHP docs at the top of your stuff, or at methods, all the dynamic stuff in Laravel. You can actually do a similar thing in Blueprint. Maybe I'll do like a Twitter short or something, but like you can kind of do the same thing where you go into the configuration, turn on generate PHP docs, run trace, and then regenerate that model, and it'll give you
the whole thing,
a nice PHP doc set that you could then just copy back into your previous model.
Very cool. Awesome.
So there's funny things you can do like that to get a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Great. I think is there anything else in the chat there for questions, Margaret, that you saw that we should throw up before we maybe just I don't know. Here's one. Is there a paid version on the roadmap? Is this a question you've got before?
A long time ago, I thought, like, kind of to your own question a minute ago, what if you had this repository of like all of these draft files, right? All these like common model controller cruddy things, right? That you could just go and copy from. Like, I want a user model, I want a post model, I want to like all these things that are out there. And, you know, I kind of went down that road and thought, okay, well, maybe I make that paid, kind of like Tailwind UI is paid or something, because you have these like pre-built components, you have these pre-built draft files. But again, it's kind of one of those things where like everyone wants to just customize it just a little bit this way, a little bit that way, and I think it would fall apart kind of quick. So there's no pro version. This is kind of my big open source project. Shift allows me the freedom to kind of work on things like this, and so yeah, I don't see any pro or paid things.
But I think maybe if people are interested, there's an opportunity to create a repo with a bunch of YAML files in it of different examples of a different model.
Yeah, maybe like a community driven one is still an option. I don't know. To kind of fill that with some basic stuff.
Mm.
Who knows what models are out there, right? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I mean, the last comment I want to make, where my mind goes to with the potential here is, we work with a lot of different clients at Vehicle and teams and stuff like that. And I think, one thing that we've probably all encountered on an application that a number of people have contributed to over time is you get inconsistencies in different parts of the application and certain approaches and stuff. So I don't know what the answer is or if there's some answer out there, but I feel like there's a lot of potential too for, in theory, if I was part of a team and I was going to build a new API endpoint, with using maybe Blueprint under the hood, I could like run an artisan command that would kind of walk me through what do you want to include, but it would do the things that let's say I always want to use form requests in my controllers, right? You could have some generation that like makes that form request and kind of lays that nice foundation for the developer, right? So the test is set up and it's kind of set up in the way that we do things, right? So I don't know if that's ever something you've explored, but I could see a lot of power potential there of generating code in, our style for this application. So helps with consistency over time.
Yeah. I think aligning those stub files, I think, is something that would get you a little bit of the way there.
Mm-hmm.
Heavier configuration for Blueprint could help. But yeah, there's always little thing. Each time I use it, I always get an idea for like more features. I feel like the command set, the grammar that's in there, the language of Blueprint is pretty set, right? Because like Laravel's not having new commands to do new components that often.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of the polish and the customization and the power to do it on a more daily basis, there's a lot of features there that I still want to throw in.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Anyway.
Great. Margaret, any other questions or from the chat or from yourself before we...
I didn't see any other questions in the chat other than just making a comment on like the alias you use, like gnawing it. I've never seen that before. So
that's a Taylor Otwell special from years ago. It's basically like get clean FD is the shorthand, and it basically just cleans up any files that have not been committed, like Nah, anything I was working on was crap. Nah.
Yeah. Oh, well, it just sounds so much cooler. So I like that.
So
Yeah.
one more looks like super important question here in the chat.
Promote freedom.
I love that hat. Where can
Oh yeah. I think this is a hemp special here. The whip hat. I don't think he has the store up anymore. I told him, because my whip shirt is actually so old now that it's like faded out. And yeah, I told him he should bring the shop back up, because this is all David Hemphill whip stuff. So I'll ping him again and tell him he should bring it up for the holidays. It was just like a little drop ship store with his designs, and I think I'm gonna do the same for Shift as well. So
I like that too. Yeah, with the contribution.
Yeah, I got a light mode and a dark mode, so I'll probably throw that out there too. But I'll message him.
Cool. Are those available for purchase, the Shift, or you said you're looking at?
I think I'll put them up for black. I just made them, and I kind of give them out to like some customers and stuff. I'll take them to LaraCons, and I have about 10. But I should just make a little shop real quick.
Yeah, for sure. We can link that in the description below. So
all right. Well, yeah, I'll have to do it. Probably a Black Friday run. So stay tuned.
All right.
Well, if you have any other questions that weren't answered, just hit me up on X or email, or put them in the YouTube comments. I'll troll them later.
Yep, and I think you often stream on YouTube as well, so you be sure to check out Jason's streams there as well if you have some questions for him there. Thank you once again, Jason, for coming in and presenting Laravel Blueprint. Like we said, there's a ton of potential here for what we can do with it. I would encourage everyone to check it out and check out some of the other stuff that Jason is constantly putting out into the community. Thank you once again for joining us today, Jason.
thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Cool. And with that, we've just got a little bit of wind down, some housekeeping here to do for the community. So let's have a look ahead to some upcoming things, Margaret.
Awesome. So we're excited to bring you next month Sandro and Rissa. They're going to be talking about a lot of great things at Laravel Worldwide Meetup, so you don't want to miss that. And so that's set for the last Tuesday of the month, and we're going to be airing it at 12 p.m. EDT live. So join us next time. And again, if you didn't have a chance to enter our giveaway, thanks to JetBrains, our sponsor, you can scan that QR code to be entered into our draw. And within a week, you're going to be contacted if you have one from our community manager. And yes, thank you all for participating. And thanks again to JetBrains for sponsoring. So November 5th is when we're actually going to be doing that draw.
There you go. Just leave it up there for one more second. Give you all a chance to scan the QR code.
And again, if you want to know what's going on with Laravel Worldwide Meetup, you can follow us on X at Laravel WW Meetup. This is the official Laravel Worldwide Meetup X account, so make sure to give that a follow for all your Laravel Worldwide Meetup notifications. And then to also stay connected, you can go to the meetup.laravel.com website. Here you can sign up and have that monthly reminder, so you will not miss a single Laravel Worldwide Meetup. You can do so at meetup.laravel.com.
Yeah, in addition to the YouTube channel, you can also check out the website for all the recordings of past meetups as well.
Mm-hmm. And again, you found us on YouTube and through the website, so you can check out the Laravel PHP channel. The subscriber count has been going up and up, so it's super awesome to see the amazing engagement from the community. So make sure to subscribe, and you'll stay up to date with everything that's going on in the Laravel community. There's a lot of great content on there other than just the Laravel Worldwide Meetup. Be sure to check out all that amazing content.
There we go. And that's it. And with that, we hard to believe we've wrapped up yet another Laravel Worldwide Meetup, this time for October. Thank you once again for everyone tuning in, and thank you to our speaker JMac for joining us today and sharing some great insights on Blueprint. Anything to say to the crowd before we sign off here, Margaret?
Thanks for everyone for tuning in today. It was super awesome bringing this to you live, and can't wait to see you next month.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Have a great month, everybody, and we'll see you back here at the end of November for the next one.
All right, take care. Bye, everyone.